Okay. So our article is over paternalism, and it's Bella, Laura, and Cassidy. Do you want to go on the next slide? So our question of the day was, should an ethical medical professional leave all decision-making completely up to their patient? When, if ever, should a clinician weigh in on medical choices? And do you want to go to the talking points?
I can just start off.
Oh, sorry. You can go first if you want.
I was just going to say, I could start off on, I think those were the talking points that I had put. Yeah. So I can just talk about my notes that I added for those. So for the first one, obligation to weigh in on medical choices and rejecting non-interference. So Ackerman had mentioned like a Belmont report, which had stated that there's an obligation to give weight to autonomous persons' considered opinions and choices while refraining from obstructing their actions unless they're clearly detrimental to others. So I thought I supported this idea because I feel like as a medical professional, you should, in general, always weigh in because you are the person who has the most knowledge on what the patient situation is, and you can give the best information on it to them. And so that's why I felt like I would reject the idea of non-interference and not interfering, because I feel like as a physician, you technically wouldn't really be fulfilling your duty if you're just simply not interfering. Mm-hmm. And then that kind of brings me to my second point, the lacking knowledge equals lacking sense of control. There's another section, I can't remember what page, where Ackerman had said that essentially the goal of a physician should be to provide enough knowledge to the patient that they feel they have control over their illness, disease, whatever it may be, because they may feel they have a loss of sense of control or autonomy when they lack that knowledge on the issue at hand and lack knowing how to deal with it and make those rational decisions without the proper knowledge. And so then I guess I don't think I'd necessarily 100% agree or disagree with that first part of the question that Laura read off. Because I feel a physician should still respect the patient's refusal of treatment, allowing them to feel like they have a sense of control of their care. But they should also as a physician make sure the patient has all the facts and knowledge to make that reasonable refusal. So I don't know. I feel like I didn't really have a clear-cut answer to those questions.
Yeah, I think it just kind of depends, because he, in the article, he discusses how he doesn't believe it respects the autonomy because it fails to take account of transformation of an illness and what it presents. He talks about the physical constraints, psychological constraints, and cognitive constraints. So if your patient is let's say they have dementia and their cognition is declining, how are they able to make these rational decisions? You need to interfere because they're not understanding certain things of their illness. And I think that's where it's hard to kind of,
and you're not going to not weigh in on that. Yeah.
Huh?
And I feel like a physician would not weigh in on someone who has dementia.
Yeah, because I think he also talked about therapeutic relationship and how the goal is to help restore those declines.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to interfere, are you really helping them? It's just hard to say at what moment is when do you have to interfere, I guess. It'd be teach their own, kind of.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Do we have another slide of talking points?
Yeah. I wrote a lot about how important autonomy was to Ackerman. Mm-hmm. He said that it was the primary goal of the physician. And but ultimately, for the question of when should the clinician weigh in on the choices, I feel like he should provide as much information as needed and fully inform the patient about either the procedure they're getting or medication and side effects, so that they can remain autonomous and in control of all of their decisions throughout the illness, unless deemed incapable.
I feel like that kind of tied into the QRA we just had about like consent, like making sure they have all the proper knowledge about everything. Like I was thinking that when I was reading this article. And I also feel like they talked about this one patient, or I don't know if it was a specific patient, but like patients who might have like acute denial, and how like simple pertinent information like may not always like be like enough. They talked about having to like maybe respectfully like repeat the information, and emphasize like the situation and like its importance, and for those people
they talked about like having maybe like change the attitude of like the physician, like the way you're talking to them, because you want to make sure that the information is actually like being processed through their head, or they're just not like ignoring it.
Right.
I wonder like how many times you would have to like repeat the information though before it seems like the physician is overstepping their bounds.
Yeah.
It's more of like a convincing the patient then.
Yeah. I feel like that's
I think it's just like, it's like another, like, it depends on the situation. It's just hard to like have guidelines like in general, because every patient is different.
Yep, I agree.
I read an interesting part of the article that said something that compared the physician-patient relationship to like a parent-child relationship.
Yeah.
Because like the physician was always at an unfair advantage in decision making due to like higher education and just their level of power in the situation. And so I thought that was interesting, that you want your patient to have the control, but ultimately like the provider is like in more power.
Right.
And can influence the control.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with that.
How it was kind of an unfair thing.
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty good article.
Yeah, I thought it was actually interesting. I didn't mind reading it.
Do we have any more points to discuss?
I don't think on mine. Yeah.
All right. So that will end our discussion on paternalism.